The anime started with a group of adventurers fight with ferocious dragon. The hero Laios encourages the others by telling them that they are completely prepared for this battle and nothing can get in their way of victory. However, deep down Laios knows this isn't true. They are starving and their movements lack their usual edge because of it. They lost an entire day because of a map mishap, then they walked into a trap and lost 3 days worth of food. As everyone else fights, Laios deep in thought and decides that they will have to head back for a while after defeating the dragon. Just then the girl named Falin shoves him, so he wonders if someone cast the confusion spell on her. That isn't the case though, as Laios was too distracted to realize that he was about to be attacked and Falin was saving him. Falin pays the ultimate price for it though, as she is taken by the dragon. Laios is stunned to see that they have been defeated and Falin tells them to run while casting a spell on him. When Laios wakes up he finds himself outside where Marcille explains that his belt got them out of the dungeon. Falin is the only party member that they can't find and Laios reveals that it's because she was eaten. The brave Laios wants to go back to save her, but Marcille stops him to reveal that everything they had was left in the dungeon. A little dude named Chilchuck appears and gives them even worse news as they have just lost 2 of their party members. Laios reads their letters of resignation and finds that they were recruited by another party. Exploring dungeons is actually quite expensive, so Laios considered selling all their equipment for lighter gear, then using that money to pay for new supplies and companions. They don't have much money in the first place and Laios fears that his little sister Falin will get digested by the time they finish preparing anyway. Laios' stomach won't stop grumbling and they're all starving. Marcille points out that their empty stomachs are probably why they failed, so they go to a village to get some food. Marcille thinks about all the options they have to eat, but Laios reveals his own plan. Instead of eating, Marcille and Chilchuck will leave the party, then they will sell their equipment and Laios will return to the dungeon alone. His friends think he has lost his mind, but Laios thinks it's a great idea. This way they don't have to compromise on using quality equipment, and he will be able to avoid monsters more easily if he is alone. This entire debacle is his fault anyway, so he doesn't want to put them in harm's way for his mistake. The little nerd Chilchuck reminds Laios that he will need him to open doors and disable traps, so he wants to go along, and Marcille points out that she cares a lot about Falin, so she demands to go with him as well. Laios can't believe how loyal his friends are and makes sure that this is what they really want. They might regret their decision soon however, as they head back to the dungeon where Laios explains that they will get food inside. His friends are shocked, but the list explains that the dungeon is filled with monsters. This means there is an entire ecosystem in there. Carnivorous monsters eat herbivorous monsters, and herbivorous monsters eat plants. Laios uses this logic to determine that humans should be able to eat in the dungeon as well. His friends aren't so enthusiastic about eating monsters, but Laios reminds them of their journeys, and points out how some of the monsters they fought look pretty tasty. Marcille doesn't want to eat any of those, but Laios explains that plenty of people hunt monsters for food. She points out that those are criminals with no other choice, and even then those guys are always getting hospitalized from food poisoning. The two argue for a bit, but are interrupted by some fleeing adventurers being chased by a little monster that Marcille easily stops. She determines that there were just newbie adventurers, but Laios isn't even listening. He is busy grabbing the monster and casually suggests that they make it their lunch. Marcille refuses, and Chilchuck wonders if eating a mushroom monster for their first meal is a good idea. Luckily, Laios has a dungeon food guide to reference, and it says that the mushroom monster is a great food for beginners. It's meaty with a mild taste, but Chilchuck is worried because the book looks pretty worn out. Laios wishes they had more ingredients and gets excited when he hears some scorpions. We then learn that despite being a dungeon, many people come and go, which makes it a bustling place for adventurers and merchants. A former cemetery, it was once a sacred place where villagers slept in peace. However, it was connected to the dungeon 6 years ago and became the liveliest place in the entire village. It's unclear how the monsters came to be, but they all look weird and attack humans as if they have something to protect. Laios finds the scorpion monster and annoys Marcille when he handles it like a crayfish. Laios defends himself, but Chilchuck calls him out as it has become pretty clear that Laios has been looking for a chance to eat monsters for a while. Laios really wants to save his sister, but admits that he actually loves monsters. This love has led the psychopath to want to see what they taste like. Afterwards, Chilchuck wonders if they should be preparing their meal in private, but Laios explains that going back and forth for water would take too long. Laios begins preparing the mushroom, but is shocked when he finds resistance from the inside of it. It's not easy, but understanding its anatomy helps him realize how to fight the monster more effectively next time. The monster starts to look like food once sliced up, but Marcille objects when Laios begins boiling the scorpion. She is concerned about its venom, but Laios explains that his book says it's okay to eat. Laios confidently gives it a try, only to puke it up seconds later. Just then some little dwarf steps forward. This guy doesn't even introduce himself and just starts critiquing their scorpion cooking method. This miniature Gordon Ramsay starts slicing it up and explains it will cook through more easily this way. Their juices will create a delicious broth and it will be easier to eat. He removes the internal organs and explains that they are bitter and have an awful texture. The Iron Chef moves on to the mushroom monster and shows which parts are not good to eat. Surprisingly, the feet will be delicious and even smell nice. Like a true chef, this guy even has his own pot, so he uses it to cook the food, but he can't help but feel like something is missing. He gets some random stuff just growing on the walls, but Marcille refuses to try it. She points out that they are in a cemetery. She is okay with trying monsters, but random plants with roots are out of the question. She really loses her cool, but her Karen-like behavior is interrupted when a slime falls on her face. Marcille can't breathe or cast any spells, so she panics and remembers that her first death was to a slime. Dwarf Ramsay rescues her and Laios was amazed that he was able to handle the slime with just a knife. This guy treated like nothing though and explains that it's simple if you know the monster's composition. The slime might not look like they have much going on inside, but the dwarf explains that their composition is actually more structured than humans. He gives them a little anatomy lesson and explains that the slime sense the breathing of their prey and spring into action. That is why people become easier targets when they shout in a loud voice like Marcille did. Dwarf Ramsay gets right down to business though, as he doesn't like for a meal to go to waste and instantly starts preparing to cook the slime too. It's not edible the way it is, so the chef soaks it in citrus juice and washes it in hot water. The slime needs to dry for 2 whole weeks, but the dwarf is clearly a monster chef pro, as he has a portable slime drying net that he made himself. He sandwiches the slime in his crazy little contraption and explains that it can now dry as he walks around. It will take some time before it's ready to eat, but this guy acts like he's on his own cooking show, as he already has some prepared for him to use in the meal. Laios asks if it's really okay since he knows it's a delicacy, but the dwarf says it's fine. He has researched monster food in the dungeon for 10 years and nothing makes him happier than to hear someone is interested in monster cuisine. With all the ingredients secured, Dwarf Ramsay really gets to work and the delicious looking meal is eventually ready. The boys feel a bit strange since they weren't expecting it to look and smell so good. The dwarf explains that the meat contracts during the cooking process so it comes apart easily. Laios is the first to give it a try and is amazed by how delicious it is. Chilchuck marvels at the taste as well, so Marcille caves into the pressure and demands that he serve her some too. Of course she is the most skeptical and the dwarf explains that the pink stuff is dried slime in her. Marcille gives it a try and instantly realizes that it's delicious. They all really like the roots as well, but the dwarf explains that they're actually tree trunks that grow upside down in the dungeon. Marcille wonders about the unique and mysterious dungeon algae that they're eating, but the dwarf explains that it's just regular algae that even grows on the surface. They're all eventually stuffed from eating so much and Dwarf Ramsay finally introduces himself as Senshi. Laios reveals to him that his sister was eaten by a monster in the lower levels of the dungeon, so he wants to rescue her before she is digested. Laios also reveals that the monster was a dragon with deep red scales and Senshi knows a bit about it. Dragons spend most of their days sleeping to maintain their huge bodies. They also digest much more slowly than other monsters. Laios glad to hear that and Senshi offers to go with them. Laios gladly accepts and Senshi explains that he always dreamed of cooking the red dragon for many years. He even starts dreaming of it now and wonders why he should make with its meat. Laios stares at his new strange friend and wonders if it's really okay to eat the dragon as I was able to eat his sister. Their rescue mission takes him through the second basement floor that is very different than the cemetery on the first basement floor. According to academics, this is the spire of the Golden Castle, which is located deep underground. It becomes pretty clear that they're getting tired when Marcille trips on the bridge, slows, decides to find a campsite and call it a day. They remember how they spent a night there before and Laios was burned himself while cooking up some soup. Marcille is reminded about delicious normal food, but Senshi reminds her that he has some scorpion broth from their lunch earlier. She doesn't want it, so Laios decides that they should go look for a monster they can have for dinner. Laios is open to requests from Marcille, but she can only think of normal food. Their only options are monsters though, so she settles for anything eatable. Laios references his trusty monster-eating guide and finds out what the most common monsters in that area are. Big bats and giant rats are on the menu, but Marcille refuses to eat anything unsanitary. Forest goblins are also an option, but she doesn't want to eat demi-humans either. Living armor is also on the menu, but Marcille is a really picky eater apparently and doesn't want to eat metal. There are more normal monsters too, but those don't attack humans, so they require more preparation. Laios super optimistic though and points out that they might be able to find a monster holding a flesh-eating lunch for them. Luckily for her, Senshi explains that there are lots of fruits during this season. However, the cold harsh reality smacks Marcille right in the face. When these fruits Senshi was talking about turn out to be tree fruits from man-eating plants, Laios points out that man-eating humans is just a name that was given to them. He uses one plant as an example and explains how it spreads its mucus everywhere. When a creature touches the mucus, the plant reflexively pulls it in. It wraps around the creature, but it doesn't digest it. Instead, it makes them into compost. Marcille's still skeptical about them not digesting humans, but Chilchuck points out that someone would have noticed if a corpse was there. There are people that retrieve corpses in the dungeon, but no one would get eaten by a monster there. The problem is that they won't be able to pick the plants in secret, so they will have to fight. Marcille finally shows that she isn't a useless picky eating diva and tells everyone to step aside as she will defeat their opponents in one shot. Marcille prepares a powerful spell with the mystical incantation, but Senshi abruptly stops the moron. This causes her to get captured by the monster, and Senshi explains that he didn't want her to use an attack that would hit the fruit. Senshi lives by an absolute rule, and that is to only take as much as you will eat. In Marcille's in panic, she accidentally hits one of the monsters and is shocked when the monster spits out a corpse. She is furious, since while the plant monster doesn't digest humans, they are clearly eating them. Laios is quick to point out that he technically wasn't wrong. He makes things worse by pointing out that the plant that is currently holding her captive is a parasite type that plants seeds inside its prey skin. Laios prepares to rescue her, but first explains that it takes forever fighting plant-based monsters one at a time. It's like they have several limbs, so there is only one surefire spot to attack them with the sword. He reveals that it's the root and instantly slices it to free Marcille. Laios wonders how it was for her, but Marcille doesn't understand the question. Laios then shows just how abnormal his love for monsters is, as he explains how different the plant-based parasite is from the mucus one. The mucus one is strong enough to break bones, but the parasite one needs to capture its prey without eliminating it. It requires a delicate balance of immobilizing its prey without making it uncomfortable. This guy has a serious interest for this type of stuff and wonders if it felt really good, but Marcille could not be any more confused. After picking the ingredients, Chef Ramsay gets back to work. He steams the plant and cuts around the stem to pull out the seeds. He then softens the skin and covers the pan with it. After grinding up the unripe fruit, he adds slime and some scorpion broth. After stirring, he adds some chunks of tree fruit. He pours this mixture into a pan and cooks it, only adding the rest of the fruit once it starts bubbling, a little sprinkling of some seasoning, and it's all done. The thing looks like a tart, but Senshi reveals that the crust is really just a non-stick coating, so they can just ignore it. The guys are surprised that it's a savory dish, but they like it and recommend them Marcille give it a try. She makes sure that there aren't any man-eating plants in it first, but Senshi reveals that if he did use the man-eating ones, that dish would have turned out even better. Marcille reluctantly gives it a try and is shocked to find that it's delicious. She points out that the compost-type plants are very sweet and wonders if they get eaten by other animals. She is concerned because this means that all the fruit the plant monster makes just gets taken away, but Laios points out that that's how carnivorous plants work. They use the sweet fruit to capture their prey. Marcille is amazed that she wonders if the sweetness is a clever trick that carnivorous plants use, and she's beginning to understand how it works. Laios's face shocks her, but he is just happy that she's getting interested in his hobby. Everyone cleans up after the meal, and Marcille wonders if she should revive the corpse with magic. There is a chance that it won't work, so they come up with the idea to leave it there in the hopes that someone else will find it. The geniuses decide to make it easier for someone else to find by hanging it, but Chilchuck points out that it looks like an execution site. That night, Marcille has a nightmare and Laios reads his trusty dungeon monster food guide. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.